something where the right-of-way exists. It is pretty transformational in terms of the traffic flows on the boulevard, but at the time, this was estimated at $1.9 billion to achieve along the entirety of the boulevard. But it creates the boulevard as much more of a neighborhood boulevard as it was coined, and utilizes primarily the infrastructure that exists. And I know that's a leap that my colleagues may talk about. And this is just a close-up showing you how there becomes like bike lanes and much more pedestrian friendly. So you really reach the neighborhood out on those local lanes, and they essentially take over the local lanes as neighborhood streets. I should mention, there was another alternative that proposed burying the highway, and that was quite expensive, over $10 billion at the time of the study, but also provided bus lanes at surface level, again, which can have the same capacity as a rail transit service. So in that situation, BRT, or bus rapid transit, has been shown to have very similar capacity capabilities as a rail transit service, and much less infrastructure involved. You're at surface level as opposed to being underground or way above ground. So the challenges, long-term challenges for us at SEPTA, and for this region, I would say, are that our capital budget, we all heard about federal infrastructure funding that came to us. We're very excited about it. It's been very helpful for us. We will receive about $100 million more a year for our capital budget. You can see on the left and on the right, the proportion of that for our capital budget. It's significant. And there are many competitive grant programs that we will be able to apply for that'll make this even more substantial. So that's the good news. The less good news is that we already have a $4.6 billion backlog. We have a lot of rail infrastructure. We have a lot of vehicles, rail vehicles. Each one of those vehicle fleets are about $1 billion for order of magnitude to help understand what we're facing. This just says about $3 billion. We're excited, our 12-year program is at about $11 billion. $3 billion will help us address the state of good repair. We'll be able to invest about $1 billion in station accessibility. We have about $1.5 billion for trolley modernization, which is replacing the trolley vehicles that are not ADA accessible in West Philadelphia and out in Delaware County. We have about $800 million earmarked or set aside in this capital program for replacing the Market Frankford line vehicles. It's unfortunate. We'd like to see them live a longer time, but we need to replace them now. They've had some significant issues, and that is a very important line for our system. We feed a lot of our transit service into that, as you can see on the boulevard. We did allocate $390 million to advancing the design and acquisition for King of Prussia Rail, and then $250 million for the regional rail fleet replacements. That is, $250 million is just a quarter of what it'll cost for us to replace our regional rail fleet. So we have substantial gaps in our funding still. And of course, the King of Prussia Rail project is over $2 billion. So you can see we do not have $2 billion listed there in our 12-year program. SEPTA has put together a slate of projects that we feel are critical for advancing our region and economic growth in our region. They're also critical state of good repair projects. The rail fleet replacements, the Market Frankford line cars, and the regional rail car replacements are extremely important, and they are state of good repair projects. Our regional rail fleet was built in 1970s. It's time they need to be replaced. We have trolley modernization I mentioned, about $1 billion of that is for the new vehicles, and then there's an additional $1 billion that is needed for a new maintenance facility for those new vehicles, as well as a lot of changes to stations and platforms and track along the trolley routes. And then there's medium pressure rail, which is over $2 billion, as I just stated. On the right, you'll see, the economic impact of those investments. So $20.5 billion in property value growth, $1 billion in increased annual tax revenue based on development nearby, and then $10.1 billion in additional earnings across the region. So even if all of these projects here are about $10 billion, you can see that there is an impressive return on investment for these projects. So as I was saying, we don't have enough funding for all of these projects, and the red hatched area is how much we still need to raise here. So roughly about $5 billion remains to be raised. If we were able to raise local funding or regional funding for these projects, we might be able to leverage an additional $250 million from federal competitive programs per year. It's still not quite enough, but it would be something. So if we leverage about $200 million of our own funding from this region or from the state, we could substantially fund a good portion of these projects. I will say that this has been our ask of the region for a long time, and we've received some state funding. Our state funding has become bondable, which means that we can finance our vehicle fleet replacements. The easiest way to think about it is most of us would finance a car. So we have to finance or a house. We have to finance our vehicle fleet replacement. So the state funding became bondable, which is very useful for us replacing the market tank design fleet. When you look though at our capital budget, you can see about a third is that bondable funding, a third is federal sources, and a third is state funding that we use. And 1% comes from our counties and cities. Over the last 10 years, our peer regions have invested on average 75% more than we have. So all of this is long-term investments. It's particularly frustrating for me to see that DC is spending a good portion more than we are when they have a much newer system than we do, and a different system for sure. So that is where we've been for a long time, and it means that we have that backlog of projects to finish. Similarly, our peer regions spend a lot more at the local level on transit. Per capita, we spend about $17 on transit a year. When you look at Denver, Los Angeles, Minneapolis, DC, again, they're spending, in some cases, 4 times what we spend on transit. So I put this out there just to mention that there are some some financial hurdles for us, and for SEPTA, we're Philadelphia, we make good on a lot of things. We make our equipment, our track, we make it run for a long time. We get every bit of efficiency out of our system, and we're very proud of that fact. But the fact is we need to invest if we don't want to see a future dilapidation of our system. And that is where, unfortunately, I leave the presentation with the challenge. I will say that, I think there's a lot of opportunity out there on the Boulevard to make it safer and more efficient. And if Bryce Harper was here, I'm sure he would hit a home run for us.
Thank you. Hello. No, there we go. Hello, there we go. Please, round of applause for Joe. Thank you. Any questions for Jody before we move to our next panelist? Any questions? Dr. Brown.
In your your last slide, you showed the lower amount that this region is receiving. But are you also looking at what's being spent for roads and highways and bridges, which would also be a kind of transportation expense? So I'm just wondering if those figures are somewhat skewed.
Well, I'll stick to my side of the fence and funding, I guess. But in terms of highway funding, I know that there is significant funding shortages as well. We're spending a lot of our state funding and regional funding on highways right now for the I-95 corridor, which again, desperately needed to be improved. I mean, we have to maintain these structures. A portion of I-95 is on structure. I would say that when you compare transit and highway funding in this region, for the first time ever, we had about comparable levels of spending in our region's transportation improvement program this year. I think that's pretty tremendous for us, but it doesn't mean that there's less need on the highway side. I don't know if anybody else wants to speak to that. I can't speak to local funding.
And Michael, just introduce yourself too.
Hi, I'm Mike Carroll. I'm the Deputy Managing Director for the Office of Transportation, Infrastructure, and Sustainability here in the city of Philadelphia. We're the folks who basically developed the Route for Change program, and many of these slides are sort of like they're bringing back a lot of nostalgia, maybe a little bit of trauma, because we worked on developing a lot of the information. So I appreciate, Jody, you incorporating a lot of that into your presentation. We were just talking, and I was trying to see if I could Google quickly the PennDOT funding shortfall, and it's big. We're thinking about $3 billion. So I think, like Jody said, it's the same story. Pennsylvania is blessed, let's say blessed with a lot of bridges around the state, many of which are closed, many of which are weight limited. Our investment in state roads, I'll maybe ask Ashwin to weigh in throughout the state, in the limited access facilities is pretty far behind the average for states, and we have more network than, I think the last I heard, it's like Massachusetts, New York, and another large state. All of New England combined. So, and we're not the wealthiest state in the U.S., it turns out. So it's not a matter of equity per se within the state between transit and highways that holds us back. It's a resource issue. It's a need versus resource disparity issue, I think. And I would just make a comment. I don't know if anyone else wants to add more to that.
We'll get Ashwin, you want to weigh in? You're good. Okay, please.
Hi, thanks.
Turn on the mic. Thanks, sir. Let's see. Make this work.
Hear me now? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask SEPTA, why is the agency prioritizing spending billions of dollars on KOP rail, which will have lower ridership than many bus routes, when lots of important transit projects in Philadelphia, like the one we're up here to talk about today, don't get funded at all? It doesn't really seem fair to have a project that few will ride be prioritized over one that could help tens of thousands of people. Thank you.
And what was your name?
Daniel Truman.
So, Jody, if you can turn your mic off. All right.
There we go. Okay, so Jody, if you could answer Daniel's question.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, it might seem that way. $2 billion and rising. Nothing's getting cheaper right now, so KOP is getting more expensive as well. We're making some choices about that as we speak. I will say that project is a little different in that there is no clear right-of-way to King of Prussia, which is our third largest employment center in the region. So we have built our third largest employment center in an island surrounded by highways, local roads, and the like. And there is a lot of congestion around there. Our buses have achieved 60% on-time performance. Unlike the Boulevard, there's no option for bus lanes. There's nowhere to put these buses that they can be competitive. So if you have a job out there, you are leaving at least a half hour earlier so that you know for certain you'll get there on time. You don't have a reliable system. It's inequitable and unfair to those seeking opportunities and jobs in this region. So that's one of the reasons why rail was viewed as the only real option out there, was because we don't have the right of way to get there otherwise. That said, it's very expensive, and the ridership is different. Many of our bus routes actually carry more riders than some of our rail system. We have very good bus service in this region, and we are able to do a lot with it. So I do not like the idea of like there's different classes of modes. That's, at SEPTA, we move people, that's our job, and we try to do it in the most efficient way as possible. So in that scenario, that's the technology that fit, or the mode that fit the geography. There's a little bit more behind it, I imagine, but.
Thank you, Jody. Any other questions for Jody? We have one in the back. Your name and your question. Thanks so much. You got it. You got to turn one off to turn one on.
Hi, Michael Ryan. So one of the graphs that you were showing on the screen there was showing how you're making up different funding shortfalls for each of the projects. And I noticed that that was not an across the board for each of those. And I was wondering, why is that? Is that when you're looking for ways to make up your funding shortfall, is that informed by like different kinds of colors of money? Is that a programmatic decision on where you make up from one or the other, or is it some kind of mix? I guess the reason I'm asking in the context of this project is like, when you're looking for money for different things and trying to get capital, where do you start?
We look everywhere. we're very, we have a great grants department. They write great applications for competitive sources. What you saw in that chart, whether it was subconscious or otherwise, was our prioritization. So the Market Frankfurt line cars need to be replaced. That's why they're fully funded. We're only able to do that because we got the bondable state funds, thank you. And so we're able to finance them. $800 million for the Market Frankfurt line cars. That fleet needs to be replaced, and we can talk about it more. And then after that, if I'm remembering the slides correctly, trolley modernization. We right now have received bids for that vehicle fleet replacement. So we prioritize based on, what is critical to keep our existing system running. The regional rail fleet was a close second or third in terms of trolley modernization. And then you saw King of Prussia Rail. So we prioritize our existing network and a state of good repair first. The types of funding that we can apply for, a bit of the trolley modernization project, we're able to apply for competitive grants for ADA accessibility at our existing tunnel stations. So the trolleys come into Center City, as many of you know, and those stations are not ADA compliant. So we can use competitive federal funding sources for those individual projects, and we can, break up the cost of that large investment. I'm trying to think, and for King of Prussia Rail, there is a capital improvement grant program, which used to be known and still has a subcategory known as New Starts. And that's the one that we've been shooting for or looking to apply for. that would cover about anywhere between 45 and 60% of the cost of the project. So we would have to make up with our state partners and our regional partners the remainder of the cost. So in that one chart you saw, there was a blue box that covered half of that project cost, or maybe a little bit more of it. Those funds, that's just the way the federal grant program works. You apply and get 45 to 60% of that cost.
So I just want to say that, you know, I think that, and I wish we could bring back that slide of all the other cities. That was a fascinating one, right? Because I think where other cities, where there is a big project, big transformational project, LA, New York, Denver, they say, we're going to make this happen. Sadly, at this moment in Philadelphia, it's like the ER approach. Oh, can't possibly do this. It's going to cost so much money. It's impossible. We're only Philadelphia. It can't possibly happen in Philadelphia. It's like this, oh my God, this inferiority complex that just pervades everything we do and feel each and every day, from the idea that we can't pick up trash, or we can't possibly fix our potholes, or we can't do these big projects. I mean, look at this. I mean, this is embarrassing, right? This isn't these guys, right? They're not driving the leadership policy decisions of our city, right? But look at that. We're the 5th largest city in the country. And look at this. I mean, it is really a sad graph. It's so sad. So incredibly sad. I mean, I know that the Taxi Bridge is a great example where no one thought you could possibly do it. Because they just did it. They just did it. So, you know, we have a lot of work to do in changing the narrative of saying, when we see a challenge, we're going to figure it out. We're going to figure it out, because these folks here, they have the resources and they have the policymakers who were driving those big transformational projects forward. They get it done. They absolutely get it done. In terms of resources, I want to bring up two pots, maybe. So the first one is Martina White and I passed a PICA renewal bill just recently, which extends the PICA bonding authority. PICA, it's very boring, but PICA basically saved the city in the early 90s when the city literally could not buy anything. We didn't have cash. So it saved the city by using the good faith and credit. It's a beautiful thing. The state always has a natural double A. Is it double or triple? It's double. Credit rating, and we can use that to borrow because at the time we had junk bond status, so we literally not access the bond market. So we said we need to renew that authority, and we did, and we added as part of that completion bonding authority, which you could re-up every 5 years. And I guess what I want to explore, Joey, is whether we could potentially use that for some of these larger infrastructure projects.
Well, I guess we could extend and fund more of the state funding we receive. If there were resources of state funding, we always want them to be fundable so that we can finance these bigger projects, these longer term capital investments. So I'm not sure I can answer better than that. So our bond rating, we have a very good bond rating as an organization, as the authority. I don't know that it's AAA, it might be close to that, it's very good, we're conservative in our investments, so, yeah, so that, anything's on the table, we'd love to have more bondable funding.
Because I bring that up as interest rates continue to climb, this is gonna be, I think, an attractive resource for an incoming mayor. Second, I wanted to bring up another infrastructure piece of legislation that I worked on, which is as we move towards 2026, we work to pass a legacy infrastructure project bill, which allows us at the state level to draw on some of the federal dollars and seek to get matching private funds and possibly city funds, although that's not gonna really get us very far, but private dollars too, to do large-scale infrastructure projects. So we will be traveling around the whole Commonwealth, and we're required to do 2 hearings in each region to talk about what projects we want to see as we move towards 2026 in terms of getting those projects started, thinking big and bold. Do you think there's something along the boulevard might qualify as we move towards 2026?
I'm a big proponent of the bus lanes and the safety improvements on the boulevard, but I can pass it along and let the city say what they want.
I'm just gonna check out for here. So, it all comes down to who is paying for what, who is paying for what, how, and I think that there's abundant opportunities for private partnerships along the boulevard, and I mean that as a broad term. You're gonna need to figure that out if you want to be successful beyond something we're looking at right now. I mean, we manage work with PennDOT, working with SEPTA, putting in the school bus lane to kind of work out what that might look like. There's technical issues to sort out to figure out how much of the boulevard can serve that way. Actually, when I were talking earlier about sort of core management, signal improvements, timing improvements, these things are already in the law. You need to pay for them. You need to design them, you need to implement them in ways that are context sensitive. So it's real work, over a 3, 4, 5 year period to really implement those types of things. But when you get beyond that, and so the roofer change, we go at 2025 was a milestone, and then 2040, in quotes, was a milestone too. We just thought that was a good long-term horizon year. When we package together the 2025 improvements, the near-term improvements, went for an infra grant, partnered up with PennDOT. We came up with about, $80 million that was going to cost, and we thought we could get about half of that from the roofer change. I'm sorry, from the BIL funding, federal funding, and then we have to figure out the other half. And I'm going to make a statement. I don't want to make news, but there are proceeds that come from things like the speed cameras that can be leveraged as a stream of cash to support the other half, to create the other match. And there's no better, more appropriate way to use those proceeds than to reinvest in the boulevard. There's no better way to do that. And it's not necessarily predictable, and in an ideal scenario, those proceeds are going to zero because nobody's speeding on the boulevard, and people are much safer as a result of that. But as we piece these things together, we can identify streams of cash. We then need to look to a community that wants to think about and transform the boulevard in terms of potentially land use, commercial investment, light industrial investment, and then partner with those other stakeholders to think about how we align our visions and then marshal our resources and then attract more. And I think it's all possible, but it requires us to dig a little bit deeper and to collaborate in ways that I think you're thinking about, Representative, and we we want to support that process. We want to support that collaboration. We want to support the dialogue that's required to attract people around a vision that then makes a public-private partnership really attractive, not just for the stakeholders, but then when we go to the federal government, when you're working with partners around the state, they can see there's a coalition that has a common vision that will attract, I think, a lot of financing and hopefully a lot of funding, grants and other funding as well.
And just so you all know, Michael, I'll just give you his background. As he mentioned, he leads OTIS, which is Office of Transportation and Infrastructure and Sustainability. He graduated with a bachelor's degree in urban regional planning from Cornell and a master's degree in transportation engineering and transportation planning from Berkeley. And he currently serves as the president of the National Association of City Transportation Officials. So and Michael has been great in working with us in the Northeast to ensure that resources from those speed cameras are here, because obviously if there is a high frequency of accidents, the communities are impacted are here. So on Boulevard, I mean, we talked about this, and I hope everyone agrees with this, right? If you have an accident on the Boulevard, you have needs on the Boulevard, buying the money from a speed camera or from a red light camera going to Pike County. I love Pike County. What's going on Pike County? Why are they getting money from a speed camera? The Boulevard. In Pike County. Again, I love Pike County. I just don't understand. So I think Michael said is so important. But again, I know there's been a lot of growing and moaning about King of Prussia. King of Prussia and that coalition had their act together, and they refused to accept no for an answer. Refused. And I think when Michael talks about a vision, a unifying vision, it's easy stuff. It's all of us demanding that something big happens on the Boulevard. But that means that coalition has to stay together around a unified vision. And you can't have 50 people saying this is a horrible idea and 30 people saying we need a subway, because what happens then is policymakers say, they don't have their act together. We're going to pivot to something else. This always happens. This always happens. My colleagues love when this happens, because if I bring up a controversial idea and they can find the vision, they're like, oh, no, Jared, you don't have your act together. We're going for the easy one. Bring back a bridge namer. We'll pass that, because no one disagrees with you on that. But no, we don't want anything controversial. So until we get there, it's hard for us to say that folks aren't acting, because we need that unified vision, and we need to hold steady and strong over a long period of time to demand that action. I saw a couple. Did I see another question? Jay, you have a mic back there?
Okay, I'll project my
Yeah, he'll bring it to you. He's moving. That one.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I have a two-part question. So judging from the of the last town hall that we threw in August, where we had community members openly saying that they would like to see a subway or elevated heavy rail route study, would it be possible to ask for a study and apply for a capital planning grant to study multiple transit modes on the corridor because this community has been waiting for 110 years in bus rapid transit. Don't get me wrong, it's a step in the right direction, but long-term, we need to, if we want to see some of the economic growth that we're seeing in some of these homeowners, we need to be a lot more robust. So applying for things like reconnecting communities or the neighborhood equity grants that are going to be in the Inflation Reduction Act. And I guess my second part is, has SEPTA looked at the new TIFA 49 program that the FTA has rolled out within the last week or two, being able to pay for 49% of a project's cost by low interest loans from the federal government. And I'll end there. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jay. Can we have, Jody, can you weigh in, and then anyone else, and then Ashwin, let's get you, because you haven't made remarks too, but Jody, go ahead, hit that first.
So for, I'll deal with the bondable or the financing, 49% of projects with federal funds. Yes, we've been looking at, financing these projects, but again, it's financing doesn't mean that it's not a grant. So we still have to pay it back. So we have to make sure we have the revenue stream for that debt service. I still have to pay the mortgage, right? So that's helpful. It's not a grant. So that's why we've been going after the grants. And we do combine that with, I'm more familiar with TIFIA loans, or a federal loan program, low interest, and they can be long periods of time, 30+ years for repayment. So that makes the debt service a little smaller. So those are helpful, but again, we need just additional funding even to pay off those types of loan programs. It's a step in the right direction. I'll candidly say that public transit doesn't get the same match that highway dollars do. We have, for the SAFE program, the Capital Improvement Grant Program, right now, even though, we expect 45 to 60% of grant match to be paid by the federal government. In a lot of cases, highway funding is more 80-20 funding split. So, and we've recently been told that 45% is probably a more realistic assumption. So that's really hard for us for those large federal funding programs, is that we have to come up with 55% of a large infrastructure ask. And I might have forgotten the first part. Capital planning grants. Oh, capital planning grants. So there are planning grants available. We could do, alternative analysis type project or type planning grants. Coming so close on the heels of Root for Change, I mean, we could study it again. That's sort of a balance of whether we, what we want to invest in.
And Ashwin, let me just say your background here. Ashwin Patel is Senior Manager of Traffic Engineering and Safety Division in District 6 for Philadelphia, and has over 30 years of traffic engineering experience with focus on traffic signal systems, and traffic safety. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering, and he is a registered professional engineer in PA. Sorry, Ashwin, please.
Yeah, so good morning, everyone. So I'm gonna address the question you asked about whether the other transit options can be studied. And I can tell you that the department, in partnership with the city and SEPTA, is going to initiate the deployment of the one thing I can tell you is that the Boulevard obviously is having high volume of traffic, like in certain segments is over 90,000 vehicles a day, along with the high transit ridership, with the mixed rural context, from dense residential to busy commercial corridor, which pretty much poses the challenges with the higher traffic areas between the pedestrians and vehicular traffic, right? And that poses the issues with the safety concerns that we have on the boulevard today. Definitely the department agrees that in the long term, high quality transit service would need to be, happen on the boulevard. But at the same time, we also need to provide a roadway cross section that addresses the vehicular and pedestrian safety as well. That being said, we will study the subway option. Obviously, the current cost estimate for the subway ranges from anywhere from 1 billion to 4 billion a mile. So we need to make sure the investment supports that high level of transit ridership in the future. And like Mike mentioned, if the transit-oriented development were to occur on the boulevard, and that transit ridership would get up to the level of market Frankfurt line or the North Street line in the range of 150 to 200,000 riders a day. Currently on the boulevard, transit ridership is roughly about 50,000, and that includes a cross connection on the other corridors as well. So that's my remarks on so far.
Thank you, Ashan. We have a question.
Yeah, I have a follow-up for,
Just that, let's get you a mic.
oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a follow-up for Ashwin as well. In terms of, actual projects on Roosevelt Boulevard right now. Oh, yes, sorry.
Name.
Oh, yes, sorry. I'm Ben. I'm also an organizer with Fifth Square and a partner in transit advocacy. In terms of the safety improvements to Roosevelt Boulevard going on right now, in the tip, I know that you guys are projecting to do a IHSDM and was it the Interactive Highway Safety Design model? I'm wondering if this will start to help maybe address the fatalities and crashes that we commonly see on the boulevard, given that, tens of scores of people die pretty much every year on it. I'm wondering if PennDOT is leading that and how that might be used to apply maybe some more broader traffic calming models as you see in Rail for Change. So I'm wondering if your office can speak to that.
Thank you.
As we go and look at the refinement of the alternatives that were identified in the Route for Change program, it was our intention to study the sample segments on the boulevard to see how much of the safety benefits we were to see or predict in the future if we were to go with any of those alternatives, including some sort of a high quality transit service.
Okay, but will the model itself, what is, I guess, goes into that model, would you say, in IHSDM?
It would typically look at the roadway cross section.
Okay.
And the geometrics that will go in any of those alternatives, and would get inputted into the model. It will predict the exposure between the vehiculars and the pedestrian traffic, and try to predict, the gas frequency for each of those alternatives, and compare to the investments that are being made to see whether there would be a positive rate of return on this investment.
Okay.
Phil.
Phil Gritzmacher. I'm interested in talking a little bit about the projected cost of the subway up the boulevard. Elon Musk has a company that's called the Boring Company, and they kind of build subways by digging underground with these big machines. And they have built the Las Vegas Loop. It's 1.7 miles, at a cost of $47 million, had 2 tunnels and 3 stations. Now, you just said that the way would be 1 to 4 billion per mile, and they can do it for $47 million. So to think outside the box, that maybe by waiting so long, we're getting a break on the price. But I mean, I think this would be an excellent procedure to investigate.
Elon Musk loves North Soda.
He's accomplished a lot. I mean, he went up to space and like he built the electric car and
No, it's a
taken over. Now he's taken over Twitter. I mean, he pushes things through.
Can the panel talk about the particular, where in Vegas, you said?
Yeah, Las Vegas.
Go ahead.
So I'll plead ignorance about what took place in Las Vegas. It's interesting. I think we should definitely look at that. There's been a few folks who've reached out. You know, I'm not sure with Elon Musk in particular, but it did come up in the news one point in time that he was going to do this. I'm very skeptical. Very skeptical. I want to know what goes into $47 million. I can't even imagine the equipment that was used to do that cost less than, $100 million. So is that included in $47 million or not? It's a good question. This environment is very different than what you're going to find in a ring around Las Vegas. If we're talking about the Boulevard, there's utilities in the Boulevard that cost more than $47 million every 1,000 yards to deal with. And the land use context is going to be another thing where you may have to acquire things you don't already own just to do the construction for a project like that, which may, along the 14-mile stretch of the Boulevard, exceed $47 million. So maybe we're at an inflection point in technology where we can see these costs get rescued by new ways of doing things, and maybe some study or analysis would help us think these things through. But we have to learn more before we can make broad statements about these being our priorities. I think that's the only comment I can give, the only coherent comment on that, but thank you for bringing that up.
Anyone else on Phil's question?
I'll just mention that, the cost of the track and third rail and electrical supply or electricity supply that is needed would be at least 47 million a mile, if not more. So the track itself, maybe, I don't know how much boring goes for these days, but the track itself is worth much more than that. I don't want to get a number out there, but it's much more than 47 million a mile. So it might be, but again, exploring different creative ways.
The trade-off is making it cheaper than $4 billion a
Yes,
mile.
I agree.
We got a bogey out there for billion. If we can get that down to 500 billion, that's a giant win.
Yeah, there might be ways to whittle that down.
Ashton, did you want to weigh in on that?
So also it's gonna depend on the size of the tunnel as well, right? I mean, obviously that if I recall correctly, the Las Vegas loop was carrying with a vehicle, not the train. So it definitely is gonna have an impact on the cost as well.
I didn't mean to cut Ashton off. I want to make a comment, and before we get to some other questions, and we probably shouldn't be talking about tunnels. And the reason is because of the way that the Boulevard is configured and what we've already achieved in terms of separation. We have other options. If we want to separate transit out so it's not conflicting with surface traffic, we should probably look at what we've already done along the Boulevard with some cuts, some bridges, and that type of thing. And the benefit of that is that, I'm going to tip my cards a little bit philosophically. We can benefit across many modes of transportation sooner if we take that approach, as opposed to trying to hit the grand slam part of the analogy. Right as we step up to the plate. And so if we think about the Boulevard as 12 to 14 miles of individual opportunities to achieve better separation, to achieve a better multimodal balance, I think we're on the right track to show results sooner, see benefits sooner, and then kind of keep that momentum as we're getting to the long term. That's always the way that we looked at the Boulevard You can make the case that that's too timid, but I think it's, feasible in a way, given the charts that Jody was showing before, that does make it very attractive for each of us here on the panel.
So we're gonna get one more question. We're gonna then do our breakouts, so we'll have opportunities for more back and forth. Please, your name and your question or comment.
Name Sandy Smith. I'm not a Northeast resident, but some of you may have been familiar with my writings on Roosevelt Boulevard, transportation on the Boulevard, and the Boulevard subway over the years. I had a comment and a question. The comment was sort of to elaborate on what our previous person said. The Las Vegas Loop is basically a circulator. It's 1 mile, 2 narrow tunnels, and what it does is it carries Teslas underneath the Las Vegas Convention Center. Certainly there's some, we may be able to explore some cost savings, but in terms of what we're looking at, if we were to tunnel under the Boulevard, it would necessarily be more expensive for starters. I think the math is that when you double the tunnel dimensions, the radius of the tunnel, the cost quadruples. But this gets me to something that I think you just said, and I kind of agree with. Back in, I think it was 2013, I wrote an article in which I argued that we should do with the boulevards inner lanes what the city did with Vine Street downtown. Put them in a trench, let all the cars treat it like the freeway everybody thinks it is, and we can put a median in for the tracks. Would that have a positive impact on the cost of the project? Would that help it get done sooner?
Well, I think we stole your idea. I mean, we option one, which I'm not sure was in the slides, essentially did that. And I'll just continue talking for a minute. The idea was that, yeah, the center of depressed lane should be dedicated to transit. What that transit is something that can evolve over time. So you could start by putting, standard 60-foot buses in there, but maybe you would get to articulated buses and maybe you're talking about some sort of light rail type vehicle at some point, and then maybe you're talking about something that operates with the characteristics of a subway at some point in time. But once you've dedicated that space and you've created a little bit more space every couple of miles for a good station experience, the sky is sort of the limit, and you grow that mode into what I think a lot of people are looking for over time.
Okay, so we're going to, and then we'll get to Pearl because she has been waiting once we break. We're going to have breakout sessions now where we're going to address, and this will go quick. We'll probably have 10 minutes. We will address questions. You should have a question and answer sheet, a little survey. Please fill that out. And then there are 2 questions that you have that the breakouts, in the breakout sessions, we want folks to address. They basically come down to this. What don't you like about the Boulevard? What do you like about the Boulevard? And what do you want to see in the future? What don't you like about the Boulevard? What do you like about the Boulevard? And what do you want to see in the future? So here's how we're going to do it. These 2 rows here are going to go with Jody to one of the tables back there. Our next 2 rows, so here, these 2 rows here are going to go with Ashwin. And then our last 2 rows here are going to go with Michael. So let's all head to the back. What don't you like about the Boulevard? What do you like about the Boulevard? What do you want to see in the future? 10 minutes. Thanks. We're going to have to mix and match, but a big group where you voting together. You'll have to just get yourself. So Jody's group back here, first 2 rows back here.
Hey, how you doing? Good, good, good.
Yeah.
Actually leading the breakout group right here in the,
Screw back.
yeah, so,
Well, I think through the second table and the fourth table, we're gonna have Michael screwed.
Jay, one survey, please. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yep. Thank you so
Guys, let's go on. Let's get back to the rear here. Come on.
Hey, can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Cool, yeah. So I'm Ben, I'm part of Fifth Square. I'll be helping lead the breakout room.
To the back.
Let's see if I can actually get my own camera out here too. Yep, cool. I'll also link the survey we created as well, just for that, so you guys can see it. But yeah, we can just obviously have a free discussion here as well. Yeah, let me try to
来这边讲中文的，来这边。
attach that. Downloads. Sorry about the issues with the live stream, but yeah.
写出来。
Cool.
有什么喜不喜欢的写下来，有什么建议的写下来。
Yeah, so I invite everyone to unmute themselves, just have a free discussion. What you guys think about, what you've heard, and in general, yeah. I should have shared the survey with you guys as well. It's just a pretty standard set of affairs. If you want, you can definitely, I can also give a Word doc version, and then you can fill that out as well on your own time. You can send that to its email I will share with you as well. Let's just do that too. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, so what are people's, I guess, personal experience with the Boulevard? And if you just know about it even from the news it gets from traffic deaths and the safety, what do you think about like the time frame, what SEPTA's been trying to do and PennDOT's been trying to do? Yeah.
Hey, this is Thomas. So my personal experience, is mostly from childhood. I'm currently living in South Philly, but I lived in Northeast Philly and grew up in Northeast Philly. And so my experience with the Boulevard is like taking the bus to the subway, to Frankfurt Transportation Center to get to City Hall or Center City, or even to Temple. Like it would take like an hour and 30 minutes. And then you have to like cross a 12-lane highway to get anywhere. So I've noticed that buses are very like unreliable. So it doesn't seem very promising when like SEPTA officials are saying like, oh, like we should introduce BRT.
Yeah. I mean, Jody's statement was like, we have great bus service, it's like, I think you're just couching a bit for the resistance and stuff like, but yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is Bob.
Mhm.
My experience with Roosevelt Boulevard is basically as a driver and as a news consumer. So, I hear about on the Boulevard. I'm also an architect, so the design of it and how to make it more pedestrian friendly just intrigues me.
What were they saying online?
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, I'm doing workshop right now, actually. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah. No. Totally. Yeah. I think that people haven't really thought about exactly what it's going to look like. If you know grade separation or removing it from traffic. It takes a lot of forms, obviously. So yeah, this is Jay right here, the man behind it all. Yeah. Absolutely. Excited to see all of you online as well. It's great engagement for sure. We'll definitely be a bit better with the coordination of everything. Once we get the ball rolling, hopefully, we can get more organizers on this effort. Yeah. But yeah, we'd be happy to obviously, collect all that effort as well. Yeah, I do think there's a question of, maybe not boring machines, right? But if they potentially do some future upgrades, in addition, with the highway, like putting the subway lanes right behind it, that could be a solution. But yeah, yeah.
I mean, it seems if we were going to put a subway under the boulevard, like our usual scrape and cover method here would be incredibly disruptive, and we'd have to go to a solution that used boring machines. I mean, I just can't imagine us closing the boulevard in order to,
Yeah.
out and install and do a trench and cover method.
Well, when there is a accident, how do drivers usually get around? Is it like 95 or
No.
no? They have to use the local streets?
You go on buses.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Yeah.
But it also is, once again, a 12-lane highway. Like I think it's perfectly reasonable to shut down the median, to get the project moving. I mean, you have to, there are obviously costs to progress, but the longer we wait, the more it's gonna cost.
Trust me, I'll defer to the person who grew up in the Northeast and experience it on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a question about like Roosevelt Boulevard. Like I've heard about it vaguely. I'm not from the area, from Northwest. So like, has there like traditionally been like action in the past with like adding in more lanes, thus inducing the demand of like more drivers, and that might be why like Roosevelt Boulevard is the way that it is?
Yeah, actually, it's a great question. We should have definitely had the historian come today, but yeah, I mean, I can speak to a little bit of that. So like 1913, right? That's when the idea of developing the Northeast comes in, because Philly has all this like vacant farmland, and it was actually the width of it was fixed from the beginning, 300 feet wide, side to side, and basically, putting,
5 more minutes. 5 more minutes.
A real like Parkway style initially, right? So kind of like Ben Franklin Parkway, but in a way that like, is suburban, that people can just get on and off. You see the early pictures. They're just like, one old time, pre-war car in like this entire like landscape of like, dirt roads. That's basically what the boulevard was. Yeah, but then when Route 1 comes around, right? And then you have this notion of, this is a huge, conduit to get from Bucks County through the boulevard and then to a highway to get to the Schuylkill Expressway. And so that's where you really see that notion of, we can get that federal highway funding to like, really speed up, service. This means, cutting down more intersections, but also like, having that green light, for a much longer time, so that you do build up that speed. You get some bypass lanes on Cotman and whatnot. So yeah, I think that you could definitely see that there's a huge tie-in to the links. Obviously there's also 95, but in terms of getting directly to the Schuylkill, that's what PennDOT I think really sees it as the priority for a lot of the boulevard. So a subway has also always been in that mix. The only thing is that whether for lack of development or oppositional sentiment in the past. It's really SEPTA's always had to have a choice between either funding the subway or funding some other projects, such as the commuter rail tunnel in Center City, such as just like continuing with their existing expansion with the Broad Street line and the Market Frankfurt line. It never got to the point where you could really put together the pieces for true Roosevelt Boulevard. And now you have something like KOP Rail, right, which is also taking priority as well. So it's funny. Yeah, Jody and the people at SEPTA, they always tell us as advocates that KP Rail somehow got their act together and they were able to get the business leaders and all the somehow supportive residents together to push for funding. That also comes as the fact that all the leaders of SEPTA are from Montgomery County and they always had the preference to do that. So I mean, there's some political, I think, grandstanding here for sure. And the Northeast, with over 500,000 residents, would be, I think, the perfect place, really, I think, to try to get some political motion going. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
I also I found that 3% of SEPTA's funding, or Philadelphia contributes 3% to SEPTA's funding. Do you think it's an issue of property taxes as well? Because we have the 10-year tax abatement as well to incentivize people to go into Philly.
Yeah.
But then we also have crumbling infrastructure as
Yeah.
has been mentioned
SEPTA,
a million times.
Yeah. SEPTA was always created as a state-related agency. So SEPTA originally was only created to cover regional rail. And then 5 years later, in 1968, they took over the city transit. At that time, Philadelphia City Transit was actually kind of valuable. And so they didn't really ask anything from the city to, in terms of funding commitments.
Let's wrap.
They assumed that, that the state would, float, as much money as they needed, So hopefully you can hear me over. But yeah, but I would say that the local funding situation right now, no one's really talking about putting more money in the SEPTA from the city perspective. It's a real shame. Yeah. But yeah.
I feel like the issue is the lack of.
All right, everybody.
I think that's the missing ingredient.
Let's either give Jody the floor, have a seat, so we can hear Jody. She's going to report out what her group has found.
I'm live streaming.
Okay. Jody's on the floor.
What you like, it was easier for us to start with what you don't like, I'll probably miss that straight out. But what we like, we love the trees. We love the Boulevard connect. We wanted we are a property. You can get really quickly, potentially. There's enough room for transportation. The work flat and this big swath of right of way exists. What do you not like? It looks like we don't like the roadways too wide. The boulevard itself is big enough, but the road is too wide, the road too fast, it's complicated. I think that's the leading from the local side to the main side, and how you turn left, right, or whichever. So using a local route to call the mass transit projects, there are problems, it's dangerous. It makes travel time underlined. What else do you want to see? What do you want to say? We talked about starting on focusing on problems as opposed to what mode you want to see or vehicle. We want 10 to 15, anywhere from 5, 10, 15 minute transit service that gets you to where you want to go quickly. Something, sorry, I think that's my piece of the Frankfurt Transportation Center on Roosevelt Boulevard. For example, it's setting the 14 traffic.
something, more safe than that's out of the book. What do we want to see? One less reason for me to drive to work. One seat ride. So the idea of transferring from one service to another, or actually from 3 services, like talk about bus or bus to bus, subway. We want to see less multiple seat rides. An impact in 5 to 10 years. No 20-year progress. And then we would like a broad Roosevelt scope, so BRT. So there's a lot of discussion about wanting alternatives, wanting funding compatible with Broad Street, and then also the BRT.
Did anyone from Jody's group want to weigh in? Anybody on any of those issues? Okay, Oscar, why don't you go next?
Right, so the first question was, what do you like about the Boulevard? And in our group, we talked about having that wider roadway cross section. Provides the flexibility of future enhancement or improvements. Boulevard, provide convenient way to get to places. And for what we want to ask in comments, and we provide that you have that, but not easy to place everything. It's a 109 level, it's a fair thinking. The second question was, what don't you like? And the group said it's dangerous for everybody. If it causes too much traffic, not friendly. You want to step on from one side to the other. What do you want to see in the long term? And the answer was pretty much doesn't cover something. So that's the move we have.
Comments about any of the issues brought up by Ashwin's group? Jay.
Yeah, I'm the one who wrote Cut and Cover Subway. I honestly would just like to know what the updated numbers are. The last time we studied heavy rail or subway metro style rail on Roosevelt Boulevard was in the 1999-2000 study. Hearing that we'll be studying a heavy rail alternative as part of Route for Change is a step in the right direction. I definitely think that the community should be involved in seeing what those alternatives looks like, whether it's a elevated subway on the median of Roosevelt Boulevard or a cut and cover subway. But I think that the community should be involved, and then we should be refining those alternatives so that we have something that's actually impactful for the community.
So let's pause on that, because I agree with you. That seems to be the logical next step. So I just want to turn to the panel and ask, we have that mic back. Oh, you guys have a mic, thanks. Michael, Ashwin, Jody. How do we get this study done as an alternative that we need to look at for future planning on the boulevard, and what do you envision the timing on that study to be?
I probably shouldn't be holding the mic, because I'm probably going to go to these guys and ask them to help get that done. But I think we would benefit from probably a small study, and then that small study growing into a larger study. And the small study would be to figure out what the questions are, the specific questions are that you need to answer in the larger study. So what is the ridership potential? What are the land use options that we see in front of us, and what can we expect to influence through policy? And it's important to understand we don't control as city or state or transit what developers or industry or, you know, residents are gonna do. We can influence it, but that's really the bottom line for a lot of these aspirations. Because for subway to work, like we said, we need to build up some density. We need people to congregate. You know, you need to concentrate activity. And that has consequences in the short term and the medium term and the long term that need to be managed. So some sort of land use transportation follow-up on the boulevard might be nice. I will confess, when we did the Roof for Change study, that was something that we were a little bit light on, thinking through the land use. There were some good conversations. We documented those as best we could, but I think that's really the next step is, you know, a smaller study that talks about those land use futures, and that requires the planning commission and community members to really show up for that type of thing. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Michael. Ashwin on this study.
Yeah, so the representative, we already have engaged the consultants to initiate that study. As we talked about before, we wanted to define the alternatives that were identified in the route for change, including looking at the option of providing the high quality transit service on the boulevard. So, you know, I have a consultant present here today as well.
What's the timing? Yeah.
Yes, and I think currently what we are looking at is about 18-month refinement.
18 months to start or to finish?
To finish.
To finish. So when do you think it will start?
So the study will start in next few weeks, in essence. You know, we have the consultants here as well, like I mentioned today.
And how do we as a community in the months ahead build a coalition to help forward the ideas to put into that study?
So as part of the study, we are going to hold several public meetings as the study progresses, and the community will definitely get a chance or the voice, you know, to guide the study as to what they want to see in the long term on the boulevard.
And Ashwin, are you my point of contact for that?
Yes, and I have a PennDOT project manager's name. I'll send it to you. Alex Harper is going to.
Alex Harper?
Yeah, Alexa Harper.
Oh, Alexa, I'm sorry. Alexa Harper. Okay, great. Jody on a side, or did Ashwin cover it?
Ashwin covered it.
Okay. Pearl.
Good morning, Jared. Good morning, panelists. My name is Mingju Pearl Quinn. I'm representing the Northeast Philadelphia Chinese Association. And the community over here come out here today to support Jared's subway project. And you know, my community don't usually show up this many people. This is the first time I work here for 4.5 years helping my community with Chinese. They don't speak much English. This is the first time I ever see them come out and become a majority. So you can imagine how important is the subway project to my community. I just want to know, in the future, if you do this kind of activity, could you provide translation? Because running something along the Boulevard to Macy, that is the center hub of the Chinese community. This is the new community over here, and we connected with Chinatown and South Philly, and we always wish for some transportation line that can connect the three hubs that will bring more prosperity to the city. And right now, the subway has a safety issue to my community, so they don't. Most of them carpool and do riding. They try to stay away from public transportation as much as possible. But this is only the short-term situation, and as the safety improves, that will be very important to the development over here. And so I just want to let Jared know again. Thank you for bringing up this subway project, and you see the number tell for itself. And I would like to thank you. I speak some Chinese, okay? 谢谢大家今天来支持这个地铁加入这个地铁的方案。希望将来他们重视你们的出现。我在这里做了4年多，从来没有看到我们中国人乡亲们出来这么多人，可见这个对我们是多么重要。请大家以后继续支持。还有那个 survey 什么，你们麻烦填一下。And later on, if you have some time, could you talk about bus line number 535 that's connect only to, I think it's, the Frankfurt, somewhere in Frankfurt, if you have time today. Thank you.
Yeah.
Your translation Pearl was a little off, but we can work on that next. So we will do better with translation services next time. We'll work together to make that happen. But Jay, did you hear the answer to the question? Because I think you had it out. So the study is starting in the next few weeks, Ashwin, and we need to work together as they engage the community to make sure that we're there, we're present, and we are talking to the community members to ensure their participation is at a premium at every single one of those sessions. Someone? Yeah, please. Although let's get you a mic. Let's get you a mic. Give us your name. Name and a mic.
Najee, I was just asking, is this the minor study or the feasibility study?
Ashwin?
It will be the feasibility study of defining the alternatives that were identified in the competition and also looking at, overall high quality funding service be provided as part of that study.
That's great news. That's actually why I'm here. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And Francisco, are you the one that's going to do the study? Okay, so here's the guy that's going to do the study. We, just because, and I know everyone knows this, but just because there's this study, that now we need to really up our game in terms of making sure that community engagement at every single one of those meetings. I can tell you, when I ran a community group we created a civic group in Kessler Gardens area, and this is probably 10 years ago. They were studying the Boulevard, and they had the first session at Northeast High School. The first session where they were presenting. Do you all remember this all? No? Okay. You remember. Yeah, we probably were there together. So they were presenting plans for the Boulevard, and similar to this, you could make your thoughts, comments, opinions known, and there were probably 10 people. 10 people, like 4 or 5 of them were there for the coffee. Like, they didn't realize there was no engagement. So I could tell most of the city-state planners, like, well, this isn't a priority. So, and it was a really nice session, a great format. So we need to get this right this time. And the past 2 forums we've had are moving in that direction. But now we need to really up our game here, because this is great news. I saw someone else's hand. Yes, please. Your name.
I'm Patrick Garon from the Philly Transit Riders Union. I know today I've been talking a lot about like sort of long-term plans for like the subway, and like for like 15, 20 years about like building the subway and all kinds of these like long-term transit plans. But I was wondering like what's being done to like hasten the short-term improvements seen on the on Roosevelt Boulevard, such as like fixing like the sidewalk gap from like in the far northeast, like again past like red line for a lot of the road there's no sidewalks, or like simple basic things like having a bus lane in the right lane, or like having transit signal priority on major intersections.
Michael, thank you for that.
I'll speak a little bit for both Jody and Ashwin here. So the bus lanes are happening. So that's something that we're working on. Where and when is a bit of a different question. We've already established lanes that are for buses on stretches of road. There's a question, I mean, are they going to be red or not? Can we extend them? All of that's sort of integrated with the direct bus conversation that Jody presented. And so this is going to be incremental, but you see some of what you're talking about right now. You go up and down the Boulevard, and the goal is in the next couple of years, as we keep coming back to the Boulevard, there's more and more of those improvements until we have that connection that comes all the way down crosses over Broad Street, goes to Lincoln Transportation System Center, and that's a system we're trying to build, which is, you know, around was a relatively new, I'll call it mode of transportation, this direct bus concept, but it also integrates with the bus network redesign work. So that whole idea of how we operate transit is evolving, it's changing, we're improving it. We're gonna try and make some investments for real-time information so people know when the next bus is coming and there's a display there. These things are all happening now.
Yeah, in the display the real-time information coming out.
Like quickly, you just want to read, good.
So there's some common themes, so I might emphasize some of the different themes, you know, in addition to a strong representation of folks who want to see more high quality transit, whether we start with light rail, subway, so forth, you know, trains of some sort on the boulevard. That's something that came across very clearly, as you heard from Ashwin and Jody. I think in terms of what people like, we did hear about the green space, and that's important. We often overlook the fact that the boulevard is also a pedestrian environment. And I think that really has to underlie a lot of these conversations more than it does, because a lot of our focus has been on improving the pedestrian environment. They want to see direct routes for transit through the Northeast, a lot of folks. So direct bus does accomplish some of that. I think people were also interested to see the way that the economy in this area is developing. So one speaker's talked in particular about the logistics jobs that are clustering is a good thing. So the fact that it still feels dangerous, that there's speeding is a big issue. Had good conversations from a couple of participants about the construction activity, the you know, constant construction being a disruption to their experience of the boulevard and for the reliability and being able to get around. You know, we talked a little bit about the fact that there's a lot of trucks on the boulevard still that kind of disrupt things, and maybe that's something we could look at. The quality of the transit options, maybe not having the frequency that people want, but hopefully we can address that through the bus network redesign work. And also that the kind of the logic of the transit routes and the duplication or need for duplication needing to be thought through a little bit better. In terms of what people wanted to see, you know, I mentioned the subway. To go back to my other comment, wanting the construction to end. It was one of the things that someone had mentioned as a long-term goal. In general, though, increasing transit capacity, increasing transit efficiency in terms of what it costs to get people up and down the boulevard was something. Also EV charging, and this is a corridor that's going to need that kind of attention in terms of making the transitions to things like electric vehicles, and maybe Ashwin and I were talking about automated vehicles have a bright future in some respects on a road like the boulevard as well. And just the need to really kind of beef up and lean into safety is another thing that people feel like we really have to make a focus on.
Thank you, Michael. Other comments, questions? Yes, please.
Hi, my name's Miriam. I'm a local resident. This is more something to look into than something I don't think you'd be able to answer right now. But just looking at the recent news, I don't know if you're aware of what happened with the Sanibel Island Bridge and just how fast they were able to rebuild it. And my question is, and for context, it was a bridge that was in parts completely destroyed in Florida with the recent hurricanes. And they were able to rebuild it to the point of having traffic again within weeks. And my question is, how can we look at models like that where they were able to build within weeks and not have lingering construction like we see locally? I'm just curious what lessons we can learn from that in order to make our own local projects faster and more efficient.
Ashwin, Jody.
Why don't I start? And it's very hard to compare the construction environment in one state and another because we have different laws. And we can do emergency projects in Philadelphia and in the state of Pennsylvania, but we also have a very different environment in terms of when you can do that. So an emergency creates conditions where some laws can get put on the shelf. And the federal government will step in a way to address emergencies, which isn't going to be the case when you're operating under a normal planning and construction environment. So there's a likelihood that a lot of shortcuts were taken. There's no way they did any environmental review of any sort when they did that project. There's a strong likelihood that they significantly minimized, fair procurement rules, labor issues when they did that. There's a good side to that you get things done quicker, but there's an argument to be made that if we did that way all the time, a lot of other policy priorities that we have and we hold dear would get put on the shelf. And so we would see the consequences over time in the long run in ways that we would have to make up for it. So we want to be thoughtful, and especially when we're doing something new versus preparing something that's already existed. Because when you're doing something new, you're creating impacts that you have to think about that would affect people's lives in ways that if you didn't think about, they would have legitimate beefs, legitimate claims that process wasn't fair, and they ended up on the short end of the stick. And so being very deliberate about what we do, managing community-wide conversations to make sure that there's a fair amount of consensus is really important, but it takes time. It takes a lot of time. I think, to talk a little bit more about our construction environment, we rely on a limited number of firms to show up and swing the hammers and use the equipment to build things. And they do a great job. They do a great job. They have a lot of investment, literally, but also figuratively in this region. And they are major employers that do a lot of great stuff for this community. But we also want to make sure that there's opportunity for others to join in that game to equally contribute to environment. And the work involved in expanding that opportunity is going to take a lot of time. It involves relationships not just between us as the owners of infrastructure and these contractors, but also what role the trades unions play. How do we make sure that there's fair opportunity for people who don't have the skills, that they can get the skills, and then they can get these jobs, and then they can build families around. And these are long-term prospects. And one of the things that we were told, at least in the city of Philadelphia, when the conversations about trillions of dollars was starting up in Washington, D.C., is that this time they want to see it differently. They want to make sure that the people who live in these places where these projects are going in have a fair chance to benefit from trillions of dollars of investment. And that trillions of dollars of investment don't always kind of go to the same folks. And the fact that it goes to the same folks, you could say it's fair or unfair. These are the people who have the skills. So there's a legitimate case. But if all this work is going to 4, 5, or 6 firms, boy, the prices are going to shoot through the roof, and the time frames to complete this work are going to get stretched longer and longer and longer. So we have to build an environment that can deliver projects like this, and that's going to take some time, but in the long run, we're going to be a lot better off.
Yeah, just to follow up on Mike's comments, basically that, once the scope and the long-term solutions identified, the department does look at, the survey construction techniques to make sure the projects are finished in time and fashion. Actually, for a lot of our major projects, we do include incentive and disincentive clause so that, the contractor is responsible to bring that project to the finish line in a timely fashion.
I think you guys covered it really well. There's a reason we have to go through this planning process for new projects, for new investment. And following up on the equity and infrastructure program, SEPTA recently signed on to an initiative that makes sure that all the federal dollars that are coming to us from the IIJA or the bill, bipartisan infrastructure law, we are doing things at SEPTA to make sure that we're making our purchases in the most equitable way, and to encourage small businesses, diverse businesses to look at SEPTA and bid on our work and our, products that you can sell to us. So we've made contracts smaller so that people can, enter into a relationship with SEPTA and really make sure that the investment flows through the community. We have a great, piece of information about our capital program where, you know, over a 5-year period, $1.5 billion of our procurements, the things we buy, come from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania manufacturers, consultants, product providers in Pennsylvania. So every investment you make in transit flows right back to our communities and our spaces. So to the extent that it's possible and that we can lower the barrier for entry to SEPTA, that's what we're doing.
Thank you. We had a question back here.
Yeah, still Daniel Truman. I just have a question about the bus lanes. It's great that there'll be bus lanes on this corridor, but anyone who spends any time in Center City, Philadelphia realizes the bus lanes on Chestnut and the 2 pilot lanes on Market Street and JFK are more or less fake bus lanes. There's almost no infrastructure. There's not even any paint, and anyone who walks around there sees constantly cars not just using those lanes as they're supposed to be prohibited, but even delivery trucks. So I was wondering what steps you can take to guarantee that these bus lanes will be the ones that we see in cities that are actually committed to buses and not like Philadelphia. And please don't just blame Harrisburg. I know that's part of the problem, but it's not the whole story. Thank you.
Daniel, I appreciate your pain and passion. Those are not fake bus lanes. They were not easy to get in, and we're only partway along the journey of making them work the way that we want them to work. So getting them on the ground, and paint is coming, and it's already in some places, is a lot of work. So we're at chapter 1 of a pretty long-term process where I think you're right. We need to make sure people aren't in those bus lanes. So I don't know if it's blaming Harrisburg or not. We need some legislation, and it could be local legislation. It could be a combination of local and state legislation to automate enforcement of those bus lanes. And if we can do that consistently, they will operate the way that they're intended and travel times will go down. We are seeing some improvements. It's not dramatic improvements, but we're seeing some improvements. And you're probably aware in past years when we've done an enforcement blitz on sections of the bus lanes that we've seen that the running times are shorter. There's a combination of things that we know we need to do. So we have to enhance signal operations over time. A lot of people don't know, you know, the city of Philadelphia operates signal technology from the 1950s on a significant amount of our network. More than half of our signal system operates with controllers from the 1950s. That's a marathon. Fixing that is going to take time. We've got connections back to our traffic operations center, communications with PennDOT's operations centers that started, I'm going to say, in the early 2000s. We were significantly challenged in making sure that those connections remain in communication because a lot of the time the fiber optics that we put in the ground get cut. So figuring out how to keep that from happening, to pivot to technology like wireless communications, all that takes investment and takes time. But that story is evolving, and I feel like if we can stick with it, we can keep you with us, you're going to see a lot of improvement in Center City on bus lanes. And frankly, the Boulevard's going to be an easier environment for us to work in because of the geography of the Boulevard, the land use of the Boulevard, the way that PennDOT's involved in managing the right-of-way, permitting things in the Boulevard. It's a different environment. So my hope is that we're going to see even more benefit from leaning into the bus lanes and making them work on the Boulevard, you know, from end to end, that we might even see for given places in Center City.
Thank you, Michael. Question here.
Tony DeSantis, Delaware Valley Association of Rail Passengers. As you do an alternatives analysis, are you going to be looking at alignments other than the Roosevelt Boulevard? Are you going to be looking at the Keystone Shortway, which is what they did in 2003?
Currently, we are anticipating to go off Roosevelt Boulevard, but if there is a strong strong desire to look at that option and something we looked at again.
That option was about, I think it was about 30 to 40% less in terms of capital investment. So I was just wondering if you do have to look at that as part, are you required by law to look at that type of alternative when you do an alternative analysis?
I'm not sure that we are required by law to look at that. Obviously, when we do our new offline, obviously those alternatives need to sustain from the environmental standpoint as well. You know, we can look at the offline. However, you know, if you look at the data right now on the boulevard, pretty much 85% of the trips on the boulevard are less than 4 miles long. So what does that tell you? That tells you that boulevard is serving as a local connection and providing that broad connection as well. So if you were to do a transit service off alignment, I don't know whether you're gonna increase that ridership significantly.
I was just going to ask, can you recall in the comparisons from the 2003, and I can go back and look myself, how the Keystone options rated with respect to the high capacity transit on the Boulevard? I think the Boulevard was preferred, but maybe you know.
The Boulevard was preferred, I recall, but what I do remember was that I think that these are 2003 numbers, okay? I think it was $2.3 billion to build build alternative C, which was going through the Boulevard, and the other alternative, but alternative F was 1.6 billion.
So
it was a significant reduction in the construction cost.
Yeah, okay, so that's a good reference point. And the things that I would say is, there's a question of the cost benefit that you have to tip things in favor of the Boulevard options, because that's where a lot of the travel is taking place.
It's in the NETA study, in the study of 2003.
So the other thing I would say is, my understanding, and Ashwin can correct me, or Fernando can correct me, when we're looking at the work that's getting ready to ramp up, we're